Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Today I'm going to be doing my review of Ghosts of Saltmarsh. It's the latest adventure book to come out for D&D 5th edition. This is going to be a spoiler-free review, so I'm not going to be talking about the specific elements of the story or some of the plot twists or turns or anything like that. I'm just going to be talking about the book overall as a whole and what my feelings are of it, having looked over it for the last week or so. So this is a compilation adventure book as well. So this is a series of updated modules or adventures that were printed throughout the history of the D&D game, similar to Tales from the Yawning Portal, which is also presented here. One last thing before I get into the review proper, this is just going to be, like, I guess, an audio review, so you can just put this on in the background while you're doing stuff. If you want to see inside the book, I already did a full flip through that is available on my channel, so if you want to see that once you're done here, there'll be a thumbnail thing that you can click on at the end of the video. So Ghosts of Saltmarsh, as I said before, is a compilation of updates and reprints to older modules, but unlike Tales from the Yawning Portal, which were all commercially released modules, Ghosts of Saltmarsh reprints 3 modules that were along those same lines, but the other 4 adventures contained within were all taken from the pages of Dungeon Magazine. Now, I will admit I have a bias towards Dungeon Magazine because it was my favorite. It was one of my favorite things to collect during the time that I was buying into it, which was shortly after 3rd edition started, all the way up until its final physical printed issue came out. So I was really happy to see that, and I think it's also cool to have Dungeon Magazine stuff in there because not as many people are going to have familiarity with it. Even if you owned the issues that these adventures were in, they may not have been adventures that you read at the time. A lot of them kind of came out around the campaign arcs that that Paizo was doing in those pages. So it is, you know, highly possible that you kind of skip those in favor of going after the actual full-on stories. So about this book, so like Tales from the Yawning Portal, the modules contained within are printed in such a way that they can be run as standalone adventures. The adventures themselves all take place in Greyhawk by default, so it actually gives you a little bit of information about the coastal region that it takes place in and some of the factions and organizations that are at work here. So the town of Saltmarsh and surrounding environment itself is detailed fairly decently. And in addition to having like the traditionalists that want to keep you know, the Saltmarsh region the way that it was, and independent and free from, you know, like a king's interference. You have your loyalists as well, which are loyal to the crown and want to see them improve life in the region. But then the organization that I really love having some information on in here is the Scarlet Brotherhood, and they were always an organization that I thought were really just, if I were to run Greyhawk, they were a villainous organization that I wanted to use. So they are sort of presented in here, and they're like basically like pirates, assassins. They're not good people overall, and it's really cool to see them detailed in here. Each adventure also has conversion notes to the campaign settings that you would probably expect to see, like Forgotten Realms and Eberron, so it gives you places where you can set you know, these adventures in those worlds. But what's also really cool is they include conversion notes for placing these adventures in the world of Mystara, which was the setting used for like the D&D Rule Cyclopedia, and, you know, had several things for it back in the days of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, although I think it's most synonymous with the basic expert rules kind of era. So to see that supported actually really took me by surprise. I was expecting Dragonlance to be the third, because those are sort of like the big fours: Greyhawk, Eberron, Dragonlance, and Forgotten Realms. But no, it actually has Mystara as conversion notes, which makes me hopeful that maybe they'll do something about Mystara in the near future. I guess only time will tell. I'm not holding my breath for campaign settings really anymore, but it would be really cool to see something like that that come out. The adventures also have some notes for combining them into one long story. And so I guess I should go over what the adventures are and what their titles are. So it includes the 3 U series of modules. They were developed and published by the TSR United Kingdom, and it's Module U1, which is called The Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh, Module U2, which was Danger at Dunwater, and then Module U3, which is entitled The Final Enemy. Also included in this book are Dungeon Magazine Adventures Salvage Operation, The Isle of the Abbey, Tamarot's Fate, and The Styes, and they appear throughout the years of Dungeon Magazine. Salvage Operation, Tamarot's Fate, and The Styes all took place during the 3rd edition and 3.5 era, and The Isle of the Abbey was printed during the days of 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. But this adventure, or this book, actually contains notes for putting these all together as a comprehensive story where everything's sort of interconnected. The strongest story thread is obviously going to be between modules U1, 2, and 3, because those were written to be an overarching story to begin with. So they pose the strongest story thread in this entire book. What's interesting about the way that the book is laid out is, even though Module U3 is entitled The Final Enemy, it's actually not the final chapter of the reprinted adventures. It takes place as the 5th adventure in this book. So you have the first chapter is Sinister Secrets of Saltmarsh, followed by Danger at Dunwater, which took place again there immediately of the modules U1 and U2. But then they throw in Salvage Operation and the Isle of the Abbey in between Danger at Dunwater and the Final Enemy. And then after the Final Enemy, you still have the adventures of Tamarot's Fate and The Styes. At first, I was a little bit bothered by that because it seemed like the most logical way to tell the story was to have the U-series modules sort of dispersed a little bit, so that you would have like Module U1, Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh, which sets up the overall premise, and then have something like maybe Salvage Operation in there, followed by Danger at Dunwater, Isle of the Abbey, Tamarot's Fate. You know, just try to intersperse the U-series so that there's not necessarily a huge gap between things, but to have it so that that storyline is what concludes the book. But upon really thinking about it, I kind of like the fact that Tamarot's Fate and The Styes take place after the Final Enemy. Because when you have one story that's the entirety of a character's progression throughout, you know, this adventure book, for example, it might feel like you're a little bit stuck in that one story. It's something that I came across when I was running the Age of Worms adventure path for 3.5 D&D, was that it was a great story and everyone loved the story, but you got a little fatigued as you went on because everything that you did was tied to this one sort of thing. So the fact that you're able to wrap up that one overarching story and then have some things to do after that, I think is actually a good decision overall. So it was sort of more of a minor nitpick at first that it bothered me, but the more I thought about it, the more I liked the fact that there was life outside of this, you know, overarching story for the U series of adventures. Speaking of the U series of adventures, one of the things I really enjoy about them is there's a heavy emphasis on role-playing and just using, like, intelligence to overcome situations instead of just having the players run in, swinging their weapons, and killing everything in sight. The Final Enemy, for example, the main objective for the characters going into it can technically be completed with almost no combat, or even potentially like 0 combat, if they're really patient and careful about how they do things. So that was, I thought, a really, really interesting way of doing it. And there's a little sidebar about, you know, what happens, like, you know, if your players accomplish all their goals without getting into combat, then they should be rewarded for their ingenuity. So I actually like the fact that it kind of, it doesn't, penalize you for not getting into the fights. And if you want to get into a big fight at the end of the module for the Final Enemy, there can definitely be a big fight if that's what the characters are spawning for. But it's cool that they can get their objectives done without resorting to just hack and slash. So really, really cool there. And apparently that's sort of one of the hallmarks, I guess, of the UK-based modules, is that they promoted sort of like the story development and role-playing and cleverness over just, you know, pure rolling dice and seeing how many points of damage you deal each turn. So I think that that's actually really, really interesting. Another interesting choice is that the levels for some of the adventures are altered from what their original source material was. I'm basically referring to Salvage Operation, Tamrat's Fate, and the Styes, because those are the original versions that I actually have access to. And each of those adventures seems to be skewed a level or two higher than their original print run. So, for example, the Styes, I believe, had started in Dungeon Magazine as an adventure for 9th level characters. They would start at 9th, and I believe they start at 11th in the Ghosts of Saltmarsh, or they start at 10th in this, and we're supposed to be 8th in the other one. So either way, there's a couple level discrepancy that seems to be prevalent throughout those 3 ones that I can at least look at and confirm that they've sort of been altered. So it is interesting to see the changes that they made there. A lot of it's just, increasing the number of enemies in a particular location and things of that nature. But it is still an interesting decision for them to alter those levels in the first place. So they've already altered the levels of the play, but they laid out the adventures the way that they decided to, and it's interesting. It's, again, just not even really a nitpick. It's just more of an observation. I do plan on making a video showing some of the differences in not Salvage Operation, but Tamrat's Fate, because that one seemed to have gotten the heaviest change to its background and story plot. The overall adventure is pretty much the same, but just how the events that led into the adventure took place was changed in kind of interesting and different ways. So pretty interesting to see how that works out. Another strength of this book is that, again, it actually complements Tales from the Yawning Portal really well. So it actually also has notes for where to place all of the dungeons from Tales from the Yawning Portal into the Saltmarsh region. So if you wanted to have a traditional dungeon crawl take place in between some of these adventures, then you can actually do that. And I think that's a really, really cool synergy between the 2 books. And it was something that they didn't have to do, but it was a really nice detail that they did, and I really do appreciate that. Another thing that I appreciate is once you've completed all of the actual modules and chapters, there's a section on like nautical combat and ship armor classes and hit points and how to maneuver them and stuff like that. But there's also a series of just encounter locations, some maps, some sample encounters with like enemies and stuff that you can use to create your own adventures after the fact. And again, I thought that was another really welcome detail that didn't have to be in there, but it was. So you can either use them to create your own stories going forward, or if you find that your players are a little bit behind in level and you don't want them to be, behind when they start one of the major chapters of the book, you can actually just pick one of these encounter locations, throw it in there, and give the party a little extra experience. So just a really, really cool idea overall. So if you can't tell by the way I've been talking about this, I really love this book. And Tales from the Yawning Portal was one of my top favorite 5th edition adventure books that had come out in recent memory. In fact, I had done sort of an unofficial personal ranking back when I was doing like the buyer's guide for the adventures, which is out of date now. But that was, I think, number 2, and the only reason it was number 2 was because there was no real story connecting it. Its usefulness was just picking the dungeons that you wanted and dropping them into your game. But Ghosts of Saltmarsh it's all of that, but it actually tries to make a comprehensive story that you can use to tie all of those modules together as well, which is a really, really awesome decision in my opinion, and I would love to see more stuff along those lines. I mean, I think it's a bit much to hope that this becomes the template for all future adventures, where they are used, like the chapters are usable in their own sort of like separately. You can pull them out and make them their own thing, or have a reason or device to put them all together as a comprehensive story. So this absolutely excellent book. The only thing I think that might hold that people might cause people to not have a super high amount of interest in it is the fact that it is very heavily nautical themed. So if you're not interested in running like sea-based adventures, or having coastal regions that is the focus of your campaign, then this might be a book that you'd be tempted to pass on. I would urge you not to do that. I would urge you to very much pick this up and give it a chance, because I think you're going to find one of the adventures, one of the encounter locations included at the end. So there's something I think that you're going to find in this book that's going to be useful in just about anyone's campaign, whether you run homebrews or you're looking for a new hardcover story to run, from start to finish. This book has you covered in both of those regards. So I just want to thank you guys very much for watching. I also would like to thank Wizards of the Coast for sending me the copy of Ghosts of Saltmarsh that I can use for the purposes of this review. They did send the book, but they are not coloring or influencing the review in any way, shape, or form. As always, when I do a review, my opinions are my own, regardless of how I acquire the material. And I would like to think that companies like Wizards of the Coast and Paizo would prefer honest, genuine reviews over, people just saying what they hope the companies want to hear. So anyway, I really want to thank Wizards of the Coast for sending me this book, as well as the variant cover, which is really, really cool. I have a video showing me opening the package from them. So anyway, let me know in the comments below, what do you guys think of the book, if you picked it up. And if you have picked it up, let me know how you plan on using it. Are you looking to run this as a campaign, like from start to finish? Or are you just looking to take ideas out of the book, or sections or encounters or modules out of the book, and just insert them into your homebrewed campaign when you have a little bit of a gap between, planned events? So I would love to know how you plan on using books like this. And if you get Ghosts of Saltmarsh and you plan on running it as sort of an adventure, let me know if you plan on using the supplemental information for bringing in dungeons from Tales from the Yawning Portal and dropping them into that area as well, because I would love to know that as well, if you take advantage of the synergy that these two books present. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Take care.